On World News Tonight, Superpower Summit. China and the US prepare for talks that could make or break the future of their ties. Lethal blasts. Istanbul suffers many deaths following a deadly terror attack, a repeat of unfortunate pasts. Liberation Day. Ukraine celebrates a military milestone, having Harrison back under its wings. And B-Boy Battle. The best of the best in breakdancing make their way to Red Bull's grand stage.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Anuradhi Vikramasinghe.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on World News. Now, the world's attention is on the US and China. According to Chinese President Xi Jinping, as US President Joe Biden has met Xi Jinping in Bali for the first time as president. US President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping began bilateral talks on the sidelines of the G20 meeting. Launching his first face-to-face meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, President Joe Biden laid out neatly what he hopes to gain from the talks. Boiled down, his goal is this: prevent the two countries from going to war. Preventing conflict may seem on its surface a rudimentary ambition for the world's two largest economies and militaries, but at a moment when US-China relations are at their lowest level in decades, it is telling Biden and his team have stated so explicitly what they're trying to prevent. Ahead of the talks, American officials repeatedly said their objective in meeting Xi was to build a floor for ties with Beijing, implying the relationship cannot spiral any further. They did not expect any of the major differences with China to be resolved by the time the meeting breaks up Monday night, but they do hope by talking directly the risk of a misunderstanding spiraling out of control is avoided. So far, they have not seen indications Xi has decided to make a move on Taiwan, which Beijing claims as its own. But there is growing consensus in Washington that it is not a matter of whether but when, and many analysts believe the timeline is shrinking. It is in that context Biden was delivering his message to Xi, who himself has watched as anger with the US sends massive shipments of defensive weapons to Taiwan. Explaining each other's red line, what might trigger a military response, could be the most important information to emerge from Monday's talks. Now on to the updates of the US midterm election. Democrats will stay in control of the US Senate next year after Democratic US Senator Catherine Cortez Masto won re-election in Nevada, handing a major victory to President Joe Biden.
Tonight, Democrats triumphant after sealing their Senate majority for the rest of President Biden's first term.
I'm incredibly pleased by the turnout, and I think it's a reflection of the quality of our candidates.
After 5 days of waiting, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto fending off Trump-backed Adam Laxalt in Nevada, the last tranche of mail-in ballots, delivering Masto her re-election.
So when far-right Republicans said they knew better, I knew we would prove them wrong, right? And today we did. The victory is for Nevada and all of us.
Democrats now taking a victory lap, defying history and expectations, on track to their best midterm performance since John F. Kennedy was president. Democrats will now control the upper chamber, regardless of the outcome of Georgia's Senate runoff on December 6th.
It's always better at 51. The bigger the numbers, the better.
Holding the Senate gives President Biden and his party control over the legislative agenda and, critically, judicial confirmations, including another Supreme Court seat if one opens up. All eyes now on which party will control the House. The balance of power on a knife's edge, with nearly 24 seats still up for grabs.
Now, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that despite all the setbacks she has faced so far following the vicious attack on her husband that left him hospitalized, she wasn't planning on stepping back anytime soon.
At age 82, her party's control of the House of Representatives in limbo, and with a husband who just survived a harrowing attack in the couple's home, many have wondered whether House Speaker Nancy Pelosi would call it quits. But that doesn't appear to be the case, at least not yet. Pelosi, who just won her 19th term as a representative from San Francisco with more than 83% of the vote, said she does not have any plans to step away from Congress. Instead, she talked about moving her party forward. She also threw her support behind another term for President Joe Biden should he seek re-election. Then there's the question of whether Pelosi would again run for House Speaker, something that could only occur should Democrats keep control of the House, viewed as unlikely with Republicans inching closer to gaining the 218 seats needed for a majority. To that, Pelosi told that her decision would be rooted in the wishes of her colleagues and her family, saying her husband Paul was improving after undergoing surgery for a fractured skull he suffered in the attack. Were she not to retain the speaker role, Pelosi, at least for now, refused to show any quit in her, saying, quote, "There are all kinds of ways to exert influence. Speaker has awesome power, but I will always have influence."
A bomb rocked a bustling pedestrian avenue in the heart of Istanbul, killing 6 people, wounding several dozen, and leaving panicked people to flee the fiery blast or huddle in cafes and shops. And now a suspect is in custody.
It's just after 4 p.m. on a busy pedestrian street in Istanbul when suddenly an explosion hits. Quickly afterwards, ambulances and police rush to the scene, while people are seen running from the area.
A blast occurred 50-55 meters away from us. A big noise. There was dark smoke rising afterwards. People began to run in panic. I saw a few people lying on the ground.
Officials said the blast was a terrorist attack in which a woman was implicated. Speaking shortly after the explosion, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan wished mercy upon the victims and promised those responsible would be brought to justice.
Relevant government units continue to work to reveal the perpetrators of this heinous attack. Efforts to make Turkey and its people surrender to terror will not succeed, neither now nor in the future, just as they haven't in the past.
The scene of the blast, Istiklal Avenue, is a popular shopping street among locals and tourists. It has been targeted several times before, during a campaign of attacks in 2015 and 2016.
In Ukraine, a country that has withstood so much tragedy this year, there were celebrations in the streets as residents of the Ukrainian city of Kherson cheered the withdrawal of Russian troops. But deliberate damage to key infrastructure followed over the weekend. The people there reportedly remain in good spirits but are still on guard and unsure of what will happen next.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine started on February 24th, and for 8 months, residents of Kherson lived under brutal Russian occupation. The city was also the only regional capital that had been captured by Russian forces since the invasion began. On Friday, Russian troops retreated out of the Kherson region, leaving residents euphoric. Despite being without water, internet connection, and having only a limited supply of power, people gathered on the streets with Ukrainian flags, shouting freedom and glory as they welcomed Ukrainian troops into the city. And the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced Kherson being reclaimed, marking a historic day.
Today is a historic day. We are getting the south of the country back. We are getting Kherson back. As of now, our defenders are at the city's outskirts. We are very close to entering the city, but Special Operation Forces are already in.
While the retreat of Russian troops is significant in marking a failed effort by Russia to stamp out Ukrainian identity in the region, Kherson still remains dangerous. Following Russia's withdrawal, there has been new damage to the major Nova Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine, as well as several bridges that cross the Dnipro River, including the collapse of the Antonivsky Bridge on the only road from Kherson to the Russian-controlled eastern bank of the Dnipro River. But these threats have been unable to drown out the victory cheers coming from the newly liberated Ukrainian city.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back to World News Tonight. King Charles led a 2-minute silence for Remembrance Sunday, honoring the nation's fallen war heroes for the first time since he became monarch. Remembrance Day was considered one of the most important events on the calendar during Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth's time.
Big Ben rings out 11 times as the UK remembers its fallen war heroes. King Charles III led a 2-minute silence for the first Remembrance Day service since he became monarch. He and other royals and senior politicians took part in a ceremony in which they laid wreaths at the National War Memorial in central London. Officials said this year's service is dedicated to fallen soldiers in wars past, but also to Ukrainians currently fighting against Russia's invasion. The day's events also included a solemn march through the capital, featuring 10,000 British war veterans, from the oldest, who served in World War II, to the youngest, who served in recent conflicts like Afghanistan. It's the first Remembrance Day since the death of Queen Elizabeth, who considered the event one of the most important engagements in her royal calendar.
The UK had recorded a whopping 40,000 migrants to have crossed the English Channel this year in order to reach the country through illegal means. The statistic is much cause for tension between France and UK, with calls for solutions growing even louder.
A harrowing record. More than 40,000 people have now crossed the English Channel to reach the UK this year. The new figures were released Sunday by the British Ministry of Defence, after another 22 small boats carrying 972 people arrived on British shores this Saturday. Never before have so many migrants, especially Albanians, Iranians, and Afghans, made the perilous journey. At least 12,000 of the recorded arrivals are Albanian nationals, who are fleeing in greater numbers each year. A 2018 poll found that 60% want to leave their country, citing corruption and a low quality of life among their main reasons. In recent weeks, Albanian opposition parties have brought tens of thousands onto the street to rally against rising poverty and corruption. The record arrivals have put additional pressure on the UK's Conservative government, which has made tackling immigration a top priority since Brexit.
The oncoming Christmas season is not set to be the least bit pleasant for retailers, with shoppers cutting down on their holiday sprees due to the looming economic crunch.
European retailers have endured a few tough Christmas seasons. This year could be worse. Inflation and rate rises are squeezing household spending power and increasing the cost of doing business. In Germany, the HDE Retail Association is forecasting the worst slump in Christmas sales since 2007. They're seen down 4% on the year over the crucial November to December period. In the UK, a raft of surveys show a half or more of Britons plan to cut festive spending. Some data indicate it could be the worst year since comparable records began in 1989. Several major retailers there, including Marks & Spencer and Sainsbury's, have said shoppers are buying seasonal goods early in a bid to spread the costs. In Spain, one industry association said retailers were doing what they could. 77% are reducing margins or boosting efficiency in a bid to keep prices stable. Meanwhile, 68% of Italians plan to cut back on purchases between now and the end of the year. That's according to an October survey. And the new year may not bring any relief. Economists say next year could be even tougher for retailers as inflation stays high and households exhaust savings they built up during the global health crisis.
Now, following a year away from governance, Israel's newly elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been invited to form government once again, with his coalition being the most right-winged ever.
Israel's former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been officially asked to form a new government. The step will usher the long-serving leader back to power after a one-year hiatus, to head what is expected to be the country's most right-wing coalition ever. With allies impatient to gain power, Netanyahu will likely seek to wrap up negotiations quickly.
I want to thank all the 64 Knesset members who recommended me for Prime Minister. We will do everything to make this, with God's help, a stable government, a successful government, a responsible government, a dedicated government that will work for the benefit of all residents of the State of Israel, without exception.
Netanyahu and his ultra-Orthodox and ultra-nationalist allies were clear winners of this month's elections, which voters hope will bring an end to political gridlock in Israel that forced 5 elections in under 4 years.
Welcome back, and for more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. England beat Pakistan by 5 wickets at the Melbourne Cricket Ground to win their second 2020 World Cup title and burnish their claim as the preeminent superpower in white ball cricket. Tens of thousands of people marched through central Madrid to protest the regional government's healthcare policy, which demonstrators say is destroying primary healthcare. George Russell took an emotional first Formula One Grand Prix victory to end a season-long blank for Mercedes in a 1-2 with 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, the first 1-2 since Imola 2020. China eased some of its strict COVID rules, including shortening quarantines by 2 days for close contacts of infected people and for inbound travelers. 6 people have been killed after 2 planes collided at an air show in Texas. The 2 World War II-era planes hit each other in mid-air at the 3-day Wings Over Dallas air show. And that is all from us here at World News Tonight. Join us again tomorrow as we keep you up to date with the latest from around the world. In case you missed any of the stories tonight, you can watch the whole program on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/OtherThanEnglish. We leave you tonight with the world's best breakdancers battling it out for the top spot at the 19th Red Bull BC1 World Final. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.